Good morning. I'm Rashmi, and I'm going to talk about Proverbs 5. Again, hospital campus, so no fancy background or scenery, but you get to see my face early in the morning. So, if you haven't read Proverbs 5, I would ask you to go and probably read up before you come back to this video. And if you have, let's move on. So, Proverbs 5 seems to be all about the seventh commandment. It essentially talks about the dangers of adultery and why it's terrible. And then later on, it talks about taking pleasure in the wife of your youth. Now, while that may be the case, what came to my head was basically a broad analogy to sin. So, we've all heard that thing, no? A moment on your lips, a lifetime on your hips. Things that you do that may seem sweet now will end up reaping either benefits or reaping consequences. He talks about this wayward woman who entices you. Now, most of you must have been in a place where you've done something that you're not very proud of. And I think more often than not, you never go into sin without first lusting for it. That can be with your eyes, visually, with your nose for gluttony, with your mouth, with something you hear, something people are discussing, something you come across in conversation or on social media. And that's something that kind of tends to pull you to the dark side. So essentially, I think this talks a lot about how to deal with addiction. And he very clearly says in this bit, remove thy way far from her and don't even come near the door of her house. That means as far as the east is from the west, that's how far you have to put yourself from temptation. I think it's really foolish when people say, oh, I'm stronger than that. Yes, I've had a problem with alcohol, but it's totally fine if I hang around with the same people who, I used to drink with. You cannot put yourself in a situation where you know there's a high chance of being tempted, and then imagine that by some supernatural strength or by God's divine intervention, you'll be rescued from that situation, or you won't even have, that temptation to sin or the temptation to fall back into addiction. The Bible also says, in another passage, but if there's anything that's causing you to sin, like if it's your right eye, you should pluck it out. Or if it's your right hand, you should cut it off. That you should do to prevent you from sinning. How much easier would it be to just avoid that place in the first place? Like, treat that person or that situation or that addiction like, like a containment zone of COVID-19. Do not go there. Do not drive by. Do not inhale the very air that surrounds that place. Just leave it well enough alone. Because Solomon says there's no point doing all these things and then much later when your body is rotting to cry out and with regret and say, how I've hated instruction and my heart despised all this reproof and I did not obey the voice of my teachers. I did not incline my ear to those who instructed me. There is no point, because while there is forgiveness and God does forgive, we still have to bear the consequences of the sins that we have committed. Later on, if you read, you will understand when I say that addiction wastes your time, it steals your wealth, and it shortens your life. If you have a question about whether you're addicted to something or whether something you're doing is in a gray area, a simple test is to ask whether if you're comfortable doing something only in private, or can you do that in front of the people you're going to church with, or your family, or in front of your children. That should answer the question for yourself. So these are my thoughts about how this Proverbs kind of plays into dealing with addiction as well. So I'd like to know what you think. And yeah, let's discuss.